Hi, I'm going to be doing Bible lesson number 34 today, but I'm going to give you a little bit of background of where we've been. The last things that we've been talking about is people who've been in prison because they've been talking about Jesus after he rose again from the dead. Peter was rescued from prison by an angel, and he was rescued because friends were praying for him. And Paul and Silas had been in prison in stocks and chains, and they were rescued because there was an earthquake. So people were telling others about Jesus, even though it almost seemed like a dangerous thing to do because they would get put into prison because of it. And today's lesson continues from that part where Paul and Silas had been in prison, and now they were going to tell more people about Jesus, and so they were put in prison again. And this is the story about Paul and the shipwreck. So he had in Acts 23 is where we were starting. After Paul and Silas left Philippi, they continued to travel and tell people about Jesus. Later, Paul returned to Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem, some Jewish leaders wanted to hurt Paul, and he was put in prison again. More than 40 Jewish men promised not to eat until they killed Paul, but Paul's nephew told the commander of the soldiers about the plan, and the Roman soldiers protected Paul, and they took him to a different prison far from Jerusalem. God had promised Paul that he would tell about Jesus in the city of Rome, and after a long time in prison, Paul was finally sent to Rome. And that was supposed to be safer for him there because the same angry people weren't there. And now here's where he's being put on the ship to take him to a prison that would be safer for him. Paul traveled everywhere telling many people about the good news of Jesus. Sometimes he got in trouble from the people who didn't want him to tell others about Jesus. Paul had been arrested and put in chains as a prisoner on a big ship, along with other soldiers and many other prisoners. They were going to a country on the other side of the big sea. It would take days and days and days to sail across a large body of water. Soon, the ship was far out on the sea. Paul and the other people on the ship couldn't see land anywhere. All they could see was the water around them, and all they could hear was the splish-splash of the little waves hitting against the sides of the ship. Then one day, the wind began to blow harder and harder. The waves splashed higher and higher. The waves rocked the ship up and down, and from side to side, splash, splash, the waves splashed high in the air and crashed down onto the ship. The waves almost knocked the ship on its side. Big, dark clouds covered the sky. The lightning flashed and thunder boomed. Rain came pouring down. It was very dark. No one could see the stars at night or the sun during the day. Everyone on the ship was afraid. They thought they were going to drown. But God sent an angel to Paul. The angel told Paul that God would keep everyone on the ship safe. Paul cared for the people on the ship. He called the people together and he said, "Don't be afraid. No one will be hurt. Last night, God sent an angel to tell me that he is going to take care of all of us. Cheer up. I know that God will do what he says he is going to do." Paul trusted God, and he urged the others to trust God too. Day after day, the wind kept blowing the ship harder and harder. Early one morning, the sailors saw land. They got ready to sail to the beach, but the big, strong waves pushed the ship into an area of sand away from the beach and just under the water. Crash! The ship broke apart into little pieces. All the people jumped into the water. Some people started swimming. Other people grabbed pieces of the broken ship and floated to the beach. Every person landed on the little island called Malta. They were safe. God had kept his promise. He had taken care of everyone on the ship. Paul trusted God, listened to God, and did as God said. As a result, God saved all the people from destruction. So, in the story, Why was Paul on the ship? It was because he was being taken to a different prison. And it should have been safer because the people there weren't maybe as angry at him. Why were the people on the ship afraid? Because of the huge storm. Why was Paul not afraid? An angel told Paul that he was going to keep everyone safe. And God does keep his promises, doesn't he? What happened when the ship broke into pieces? Some people swam or they grabbed pieces of wood and they floated safely onto a sandy shore. We know that Paul showed courage and leadership when he was on the ship, even though he was a prisoner. He told the others that God would protect them. In the book of Acts, chapter 27, much of this is found. You might want to read that yourself. He told the people that God would protect them. He told the people that God would give them advice. He also helped the sailors, and he prevented the sailors from abandoning the ship because God had told them that was what they should just stay with it. They would be safe. And he encouraged the people to eat something because they were going to need their strength. And the people did listen to them. And because of Paul, the commander wanted to spare Paul's life because Paul had helped him and helped to get the prisoners safely there. So even in prison, he was starting to gain the confidence of the people that were there. And so now they landed on the shore. And here's the next part, and this is in Acts chapter 28, verses 1 through 31. They're on the island of Malta, and the people were safe, so here's what happens next. All 276 people swam, paddled, or drifted to the island and stood on the cold, rainy shore. This is Acts 27, verses 43 and 44. The people who lived there hurried to welcome them, and they built a fire to warm everyone. Paul was helping to gather wood when suddenly a snake called a viper came out from between the sticks and bit his hand, and the islanders, knowing that Paul was a prisoner, thought that he would die as a punishment. After he bit his hand, it was a poisonous snake, and when people got bit by that snake and they were familiar with it, they did die. But we know that God was in control of the situation, so the results were a little different. The islanders, knowing he was a prisoner, thought he would die as a punishment for what he had done wrong, but Paul just shook off the snake and was just fine. Then the islanders, who didn't know the one true God, thought that Paul himself was some kind of God. Well, of course, Paul was eager to tell them the truth about God and to share who Jesus is. The leader of Malta, named Publius, welcomed Paul into his home. Publius's father was very sick, so Paul visited him and prayed for him and laid hands on him. God made Publius's father well. Then many sick people came to Paul from all over the island of Malta, and they too were healed. And everyone else on the ship stayed on Malta for 3 months until the weather was safe to sail again. The sailors found a new ship, and all those who had been on the first ship set out for sail to Rome again. Now, when Paul got bitten by the snake, he didn't use any medicine because the reason that he didn't get sick was because God had healed him. And Paul also healed many of the people on that island, and it wasn't Paul healing them, it was God, of course. So what good things happened after the shipwreck? Well, the people of Malta had never heard about God before, so Paul told them about him. And God also used Paul to heal people that were sick there. What did the people think when the snake first bit Paul? They thought he was being punished because he was a prisoner and he was going to be punished for the bad things he had done. what did they think when Paul was not hurt by the snake? They thought that Paul was a god. And Paul quickly told them that that was not true. He was not God, but he served the one true God. What happened when the people learned that Paul helped healed Publius's father? Well, anyone all over the island that had been sick came to also be healed. And God did do some miracles there and healed many people. And so God used this bad situation to turn into something good. And that is the end of this story. Once again, it's in Acts. A lot of it is in chapter 27 and 28. I will read the second part coming up next.